We seem to have a fascination, even an obsession with serial killers. Our curiosity is almost insatiable, and the media knows this. They're constantly serving us documentaries, series, and films exploring the lives of serial killers. But it doesn't stop with real killers. We've created fictional ones too. Characters like Hannibal Lecter, charismatic, always a step ahead of the police, a master orator, fan the flames of our fascination with serial killers even further. But let's be real, consuming all this content can bring a strange sense of guilt. These aren't just stories, these were real people who lost their lives. Imagine being the loved one of a murder victim, dealing with a trauma that will last for generations. Yet here we are, watching with morbid curiosity as the life story of the very person who inflicted that pain is packaged for entertainment. At some point, it starts to feel wrong. The way the media romanticizes and dramatizes these figures, and the way we consume it, hanging on every dark detail. In fact, some people's fascination reaches unsettling extremes. Remember the love letters and marriage proposals sent to killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, Richard Ramirez, or Ted Bundy? All of this brings us to an inevitable question. Why are we so drawn to serial killers? Let's start with a definition of a serial killer. In his book, criminologist Scott Bond identifies 3 defining traits of serial killers. They have at least 3 victims. Each murder takes place at different times and locations. The killer experiences a cooling-off period between murders, a temporary calm before killing again. By defining them this way, we distinguish serial killers from other types of murderers. For example, consider mass murderers. Unlike serial killers, mass murderers kill multiple people in a single event, often targeting a specific group or place, like a high school, university campus, or government building. Their motivation usually involves a desire for revenge or punishment against their chosen group. Mass murderers typically end their own lives or are killed by law enforcement, aware that police will arrive at the scene immediately. The most well-known example is Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, 2 high school students who, in 1999, attacked their own school, killing fellow students and teachers before taking their own lives. Their motivation was rooted in punishing those they despised at school. There's also a type of killer that overlaps with both mass and serial killers, spree killers. The key distinction is that spree killers commit murders in a short time span across different locations. Spree killers are more similar to serial killers in that they murder in multiple places, but they lack a cooling-off period. They act in a continuous state of rage, killing until they're either subdued or their anger is exhausted. Among all these types of killers, contract killers resemble serial killers the most. On the surface, contract killers seem like serial killers, as they also kill people one by one, often with intervals between murders. However, the key difference lies in their motivations. A serial killer chooses their own victims, driven by a personal urge or thrill, while a contract killer has no such choice. They kill whomever the client selects, and their primary motivation is financial gain. Unlike serial killers, who may experience intense gratification in a cooling-off phase after each murder, contract killers approach their job with a detached, professional mindset, showing little or no emotional engagement. As with any topic, there are also misconceptions we believe about serial killers. One common myth is that all serial killers are men. In reality, around 17% of serial killers in the United States are women, compared to women making up only 10% of all murder cases. So proportionally, women are represented more among serial killers than in general homicide statistics. Female serial killers often differ from male serial killers in both motivation and methods. Women tend to use less violent and quieter methods, opting for faster, less brutal ways to kill. A well-known example is Aileen Wuornos, who, after a lifetime of experiencing sexual abuse and physical assault from men, sought revenge. However, instead of torturing her victims with sharp objects, she chose a firearm, allowing for quick and relatively painless deaths. Wuornos' lasting notoriety isn't just because she was a female serial killer. It's also because she diverged from the sadistic, torturous type of serial killer, more closely resembling a contract killer in her approach to murder. Another common myth is that all serial killers are white. In reality, serial killers come from various ethnic backgrounds, including Black, Asian, and Latino communities. In fact, Black individuals make up around 20% of serial killers. This misconception likely stems from media focus, as most popular serial killers featured in documentaries are white. There's also a misleading perception that serial killers are more likely to target victims of different races, such as a white killer targeting black victims or vice versa. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer, whose victims were predominantly black, fueled this perception, with some in the media speculating his crimes could stem from racial hatred. However, statistics reveal that roughly 90% of serial killer murders occur within the same ethnic group. Another misconception: all serial killers are isolated, lonely, and socially awkward individuals. The truth is, many serial killers blend in seamlessly with society. A serial killer could be a charming, well-liked family person with a stable job who uses their charisma to manipulate those around them. Take Dennis Rader, for example, a married father of two, employed in a government office, and respected in his church community. There's also the myth that all serial killers are constantly on the move, killing in different cities. This stereotype largely originates from Ted Bundy. Bundy would travel across state lines in his iconic VW Beetle, committing murders in various locations to avoid being traced by local police. He exploited poor communication between police departments across states, allowing him to stay under the radar. But Bundy is a rare example. Jeffrey Dahmer, for instance, committed nearly all his murders in his small apartment, and Jack the Ripper confined his brutal crimes to a specific neighborhood in London. Most serial killers operate within a comfort zone, a place they feel secure. For Dahmer, it was his apartment. For Jack the Ripper, his neighborhood. And for Bundy, his car, giving him his traveler archetype. But as Bundy's case shows, serial killers who move from city to city are actually uncommon. Most prefer to kill within a familiar territory. One of the most critical myths is that all serial killers either possess a demonic intelligence or are insane. Watching interviews with killers like Ted Bundy or Richard Ramirez, it's easy to be impressed by their charisma and sharp rhetoric. Edmund Kemper, with his IQ of 145, presents the image of a genius serial killer. Fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter, who always seem one step ahead of the police, further reinforce the notion that serial killers must possess superior intelligence. However, the average IQ of serial killers is actually quite ordinary. Often the reason some of them are so hard to capture isn't due to their brilliance, but rather to law enforcement's errors. Dahmer's neighbor, for instance, repeatedly reported suspicious behavior and foul odors from his apartment, yet the police ignored these complaints. As for the idea that all serial killers are insane, that too is a misconception. While serial killers certainly aren't normal, most exhibit antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. This doesn't equate to insanity. They understand the legal and moral implications of their crimes. In fact, some have even tried to feign insanity to avoid punishment. David Berkowitz, for example, claimed that he was possessed by a demon who compelled him to kill, yet psychiatric evaluations determined he was entirely sane. Another myth: all serial killers feel a compulsion to keep killing. It's widely believed that once a serial killer commits murder, they are driven to continue. While it's true that some can't stop until they are caught or killed, it's wrong to generalize this trait. Certain killers, even when not threatened by capture, have voluntarily stopped. For instance, Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, murdered between 1974 and 1991, but then ceased killing entirely from 1992 to 2005. When asked why, Rader explained that his motivation was sexual gratification, which he eventually found in other activities, eliminating his need to kill. Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer are other examples of serial killers who committed crimes for a period and then stopped. Finally, there's the myth that all serial killers secretly want to be caught. There's a perception that serial killers leave subtle clues behind at crime scenes, hoping the police will pick up on them and eventually end their adventure with an arrest. In reality, it's quite the opposite. As serial killers gain experience, they tend to leave fewer clues, learning to better conceal their tracks. Jeffrey Dahmer and Joel Rifkin both confessed that their first murders were the hardest, largely due to overwhelming fear of capture. But as they continued, they became more meticulous about cleaning up crime scenes, reducing the risk of being caught. Let's move on to our final myth. Serial killers' victims are always women. This is perhaps the closest myth to the truth. as approximately 70% of serial killer victims are indeed women. What's particularly striking is that between 1985 and 2010, women accounted for only 22% of all murder victims in the US, but they made up 70% of serial killer victims.